Hey there, welcome back to our Sky Tonight program. My name is Seth Mayo. I'm the curator of astronomy for the Lohman Planetarium at MOAS. And in this program, we're covering the dates of February 21st through February 27th, 2022. We're going to start things off by saying farewell to the great fall constellation of Pegasus, the winged horse, in our sunset sky towards the northwest. Then we're going to say hello for our evening sky to the great spring constellation of Leo the Lion rising in the east. And then we're going to shift to the early morning by the rest of the week as you watch the waning crescent moon join a couple planets in our sky. So let's take a look. If you happen to be gazing towards the west and northwest just around sunset and a little bit after, at this time of year we can start to say farewell to the great winged horse constellation of Pegasus. Now, if you've ever found Pegasus before, tried to look for this quite famous and well-known character from Greek mythology, you want to look for his body, which is called the Great Square of Pegasus. That is an asterism that is the easiest part to find. So if you look just above the west and northwest during sunset and a little bit after, you may notice these four stars here. They're not the brightest of stars, but if you do connect them together, they look like a pretty even-sided rectangle or square, but usually we call this the Great Square of Pegasus. So we'll just highlight this constellation. We're seeing some of it cut off by the horizon, the ground, and its altitude above the horizon does depend on your latitude. If you go farther north, you'll see a little bit more of Pegasus. If you go a little farther south in the northern hemisphere, you'll see a little bit less. But generally, this was the view that a lot of folks will probably see. So this is the body of the flying horse, and in this area here is kind of where the head and legs are. So just to help us out, we'll turn on the picture of Pegasus. I'll turn off the ground just so you can see the entire constellation here. So again, this is a fall constellation technically, and obviously we're in the winter time now, but those fall constellations do linger for quite some time. And I've talked about Pegasus before on many different occasions, but just as a reminder, this was this famous horse that most likely was born out of a very violent story involving Perseus when he defeated the Gorgon named Medusa, the lady with snake hair, and you would turn to stone if you look into her eyes. When he cut off her head, the blood from her head, and it sounds kind of grotesque and gory, but that's just the way Greek mythology is, the blood from her head fell into the ocean, and I guess the combination of the ocean and her blood somehow formed this flying creature that sprung out of the ocean. So that's kind of a well-known origin story, and there's some variations to that story depending on who said it, and maybe a poet or an author long ago that may have told their own version of that story, but that's a common mythology here of this flying horse. And a lot of times this horse is associated with the mighty hero and monster slayer named Bellerophon, who rode Pegasus to defeat the scary hybrid creature called Chimera. So Pegasus is involved in that famous monster slaying. But the constellation is worth mentioning, even though it sits very low in the sky right now. So you may notice that square right around sunset. The square does kind of stand out because it's just a geometric shape that is fairly even-sided. So those kinds of shapes usually, to me, stick out in the sky, since typically the stars look so messy and scattered. Now, since things are constantly rising and setting in the sky all year round, of course, when you're saying goodbye to some things, you're saying hello to other things on the opposite side of the sky. And that holds true if you're looking towards the east right now. In the evening, you'll start to have a better and better view of this great spring constellation called Leo the Lion. And Leo is quite famous. Of course, many people know this great lion from Greek mythology because it's one of the signs of the zodiac. And just for reference here is Leo the Lion. I'll turn on the lines of Leo so you can see him. But since this line lies on something called the ecliptic, and that's the apparent path that the sun seems to make in the sky, that's also the plane of our solar system, the sun does sort of move through this area at a certain time of the year and sits within Leo at a certain time. And that's why it's one of the signs of the zodiac, or it's a zodiacal constellation. So that's made it quite well known for many folks. But it's actually one of the oldest constellations in our sky. It's been known since even before the ancient Greeks. You can go back to 4000 BC to some of the earliest descriptions of this constellation, even to the ancient Sumerians. They were talking about this group of stars as a lion in the sky. And of course, this is the head of Leo. and the head is part of an asterism called the sickle, kind of like that farmer's tool where you cut grass with. So that's a pretty well-known asterism in the sky that's relatively easy to find. Those stars are fairly bright. So that's the head of Leo. Here is his body, and his tail forms this nice right triangle. Every time I see it in the sky, to me it looks like a broken clothes hanger, like one half of a clothes hanger, like this side's missing here. That's just where my mind goes. Sometimes these constellations remind me of everyday objects. But anyway, this was a lion to many folks through history here. I'll put up his picture, at least one form of him, and there he is. So there's some relatively bright stars in this area. There's not a lot of bright stars around it, so Leo does stand out since it's the brightest grouping of stars in this part of the sky. Especially this star right here near his chest. This is called Regulus. That is the brightest star in Leo, or it's called Alpha Leonis. And Regulus is a name that means little king. And that's something that is common with Leo and lions in particular. A lot of times royalty has connections to lions as a very regal and very kingly type of symbol. And so that's quite common symbol used throughout history. So you may notice Regulus the most. It's a quite famous multiple star system. And the other star I always like to look out for is a star down here at the tail. It's called Denebola. And the part of Deneb is Arabic, which means tail, or at least it's from an Arabic word that originally meant tail. So that word Deneb is found in other stars in the night sky that usually reference the tail of an animal. And from Greek mythology, Leo is commonly known as the Nemean lion because this lion harbored himself in a cave in the town of Nemea and was just terrorizing this town, stealing people and bringing it to this cave and holding them captive. And there's one very famous warrior that fought and defeated this lion. You know his name. The Greek name is Heracles, but we usually go by the Roman name of Hercules. Hercules had these 12 labors that he had to complete, these challenges to clear his name from past wrongdoings and transgressions. And the first of his labors was actually to go out and defeat this lion, now known as Leo. And so he did so. He wrestled it to the ground. Leo had an impenetrable skin that you cannot cut with any kind of blade or weapon. So it had to be wrestled to the ground. And I guess Hercules strangled the lion. He defeated Leo. And then Hercules actually used Leo's pelt as a shield because it was so strong. And so a lot of artwork depicting Hercules or Heracles has him wearing this pelt of a lion. And that is the same pelt from Leo. So Leo kind of dies tragically from the stories, but he was a terrorizing kind of beast, and Zeus, the leader of all the gods, decided to place him in the sky to remember this labor completed by Hercules. So those stories are quite well known for this constellation. And one more thing I'll mention with Leo is some really interesting deep sky objects you can find near the rear end of Leo, kind of near where his back legs are. So we're going to zoom into that section here. I'll turn off the picture so we're not crowding things up too much. And I'm going to show you something that is best seen through binoculars or especially a telescope, and that is a trio of galaxies. And this is really cool. So we're going to kind of zoom in here, and right underneath this star here, so this star is called Chertan or Chertan. So just underneath it, you'll see possibly these three galaxies. Again, you need a telescope or binoculars to notice this. As we zoom into it here, you'll see these galaxies come into view. These galaxies are definitely not close. They're over 30 million light years away. And so the light takes over 30 million years to travel from these galaxies, these giant collections of stars, to reach us here on Earth. So this is called the Leo triplet. Makes sense. There's a trio of galaxies that are fairly close, and they all kind of gravitationally interact with one another. These two galaxies here are called M66 here. And this one up above it is M65. The M references Charles Messier, the Messier catalog. And so that was a French astronomer who discovered those two little fuzzy objects in the sky. So they're commonly known as M65 and M66. And they are these beautiful spiral galaxies. They'll have different tilts that you notice. So some are more tilted or face on than others. So this is more of a tilted galaxy. So you see a little bit more of the slice of it, as opposed to M66 down here. It's a little bit more face on. And especially M66, that has really an interesting shape. And we have amazing pictures of these galaxies M66 through large observatories or orbiting space telescopes, along with M65 as well, that we find just above it is quite nice too. So these are some great galaxies nearby. But then we have this one over to the left. And this one has a very poetic name of NGC 3628. That's just part of a big catalog of objects. But I like the common name for it, which is the Hamburger Galaxy, because I guess it looks like a hamburger in the sky. We're seeing this galaxy edge on, all right? So we're seeing it through the disk is what you're finding here. And what astronomers have actually found through observations and careful analysis of the stars of these galaxies is that the Hamburger Galaxy here and this galaxy here, M66, have interacted with each other in the past. And so their gravities have influenced one another, stretching out material, pulling stars away from each other, and creating some interesting shapes. And so they've had some interaction. But M65 is not alone in this as well. This galaxy has also possibly interacted with these two, but not as heavily as M66 and NGC 3628, or the Hamburger Galaxy. So it's interesting to see that, to know these galaxies have interacted and are still doing so now, and they're so close. So through a telescope, through binoculars, are really, really interesting, and a lot of astrophotographers love to take pictures of the Leo triplet underneath the kind of tail end, the rear end of this mighty lion in our sky. So hopefully you can start seeing Leo rise in the east in our evening. It's great for the winter and really the spring. It's technically a spring constellation, but at this time of year we can see it pretty much all night long. Now, if you happen to be up in the early morning hours this week before sunrise, you have a chance to see some planets and the moon joining in on a little planetary party that's been going on. So as we start with Tuesday morning, you'll find the moon is still larger than half full. So this is a waning gibbous here. You can see a little bit higher up and a little bit larger. But as we continue through successive mornings all the way through the weekend here, we're going to find the moon continue to wane. So we're seeing less and less of the moon. This is on the 23rd when we have about last quarter moon when it's half full. Then we're going into the waning crescent phases here. So this is the 24th, 25th, and then finally by the weekend here, 26th, and then the 27th, you'll see the moon get even closer to the horizon, but also closer to these planets here. So this is on the 27th, Sunday morning, a very thin crescent. Sometimes we call this an old moon. So as the moon goes through all of its phases and all the way around back to a new moon again, this is when the moon has gone through so many days of its phases. We typically call it an old moon, right before a new moon phase when you can't see the moon at all. So we have this nice old moon, or really a waning crescent. That's really nice. And right above it is the planet Mars, you see there. This object looks like a little red non-twinkling star, so that's the nice red planet there. And what's great about Mars, I'll just mention very briefly, is just last week we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the Perseverance rover that landed on Mars. It's amazing, that new rover that's looking for past signs of ancient, microbial life landed there now just over a year ago, and it's been doing some great science. So I'm looking forward to the next year for Perseverance on Mars. So if you see Mars there, you can kind of think about what's going on with our exploration of this planet. And then above that is the very luminous, very bright planet Venus, still shining bright from a couple weeks ago when it was at its brightest in the sky. And it's slowly been dimming, but it's still exceptionally bright and very noticeable in the morning. And so that's going to definitely dominate this part of the sky. And if you do have a very clear view of the east, just before the sun rises, you may catch a glimpse of a planet here. That's Mercury, the closest planet to our sun. And next week, we're going to talk about another planet that will be joining Mercury here sometime soon that was recently in our evening sky and is now transitioning to the early morning. So either way, hope you get a chance to see, if you're up in the morning, the moon joining Mars and Venus, especially by the weekend. That's a nice photographic opportunity if you're taking a walk or something, or maybe if you're on a coast with a beach. This is a great time to be looking in this area of the sky. Well, that's it for another edition of our Sky Tonight program. We always appreciate you tuning in and checking out what we're doing here on this program, so thank you very much. And hopefully you get a chance to visit us soon. I want to advertise one event that we're holding on Saturday the 26th, and that is our night sky viewing and candlelight tour at our Gamble Place property in Port Orange. If you're a local here or visiting in this area, we have this other property a little bit south of our main museum campus that's out a little bit in the wilderness, a little bit of a darker spot. and it's really great. So we're going to be doing some stargazing and a little bit of candlelight exploration of these old historic homes. You'll get a chance to tour through the Gamble Bungalow and what's called the Black Forest Cottage to learn about the history of this unique hunting lodge. And we'll have some telescopes out and our planetarium team members looking at various objects in our night sky, and we'll be doing live star tours and all that kind of fun stuff. So maybe you see it out there. There is an RSVP list to reserve spots for this, so you can call our museum for that reservation. So maybe we'll see you out there for a beautiful stargazing party and candlelight tour. So with that, we hope to see you back here again. Take care, and of course, happy stargazing.